And here is Mark Carney now beginning his remarks. Let's listen in.
D'une série de réunions visant à établir une nouvelle relation globale entre le Canada et les États-Unis. President Trump and I met today as leaders of two sovereign independent nations. And I want to thank the President and the members of his cabinet that attended for welcoming me and my colleagues to the White House and for our very constructive discussions. I conveyed to the President today what our countries have long proven to be true, that Canada and the United States are stronger when we work together. We can get a better deal for our workers. We can create more opportunities for our businesses. We can build stronger economies across North America when we work together. And really today marked the end of the beginning of a process of the United States and Canada redefining that relationship of working together. The question is how we will cooperate in the future, how we can build an economic and security relationship built on mutual respect, built on common interests, and that delivers transformational benefits to our economies. We had what I would describe as wide-ranging and, as I said a moment ago, very constructive discussions. We agreed to have further conversations in the coming weeks, and we are looking forward to meeting in person at the G7 summit in Kananaskis in Alberta. Now, while that's going on, in Canada, we will focus on what we can control. Alors, demain, je réunirai avec les premiers ministres pour un appel afin de faire le point.
We will have a call to provide an update on the conversations
et de discuter du travail qui nous attend. We are going to reinforce our strength at home. We will reinforce Canada's security for an increasingly dangerous and divided world. We will transform our border security, our security in the Arctic, and our support for our allies around the world. We'll build an economy that creates jobs, grows incomes, and withstands shocks, when, in fact, the strongest economy in the G7, an economy that works for everyone. Nous allons bâtir une économie canadienne renouvelée.
We will build a renewed Canadian economy so that we can succeed in a world that is in the process of being profoundly changed. We will build the infrastructure that will allow our businesses to enter new markets around the world. And we will build a single Canadian economy instead of 13.
And we can give ourselves far more than any foreign government can ever take away. So now is the time to build, and based on the discussion today, to build at home and to build with our partners abroad, including the United States. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now begin the press conference. We'll begin with questions from the traveling delegation. First question, première question.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. I was watching your face through the meeting in the Oval Office, and I wondered what was going through your mind when the President talked about erasing the artificial border and how he criticized your predecessor and Madam Freeland.
Thank you for your question. I'm glad that you couldn't tell what was going through my mind as that was going through. With respect to the first point, the President has made known his wish about that issue for some time. I've been careful always to distinguish between wish and reality. I was clear there in the Oval Office, as I've been clear throughout on behalf of Canadians, that this is never going to happen. Canada is not for sale. It never will be for sale. Some things, as I said in the room, some things are never for sale. And he agreed with that. I distinguish between the two. And then with respect to the importance of reestablishing a constructive relationship for negotiations of a partnership, of an economic and security partnership, which is what we were here for. I look forward, not back, and I think we established a good basis today.
What gives you specifically any indication that the president is willing to renegotiate a new trade deal with you and drop tariffs?
Apart from the fact that he said that he would, is willing to have that negotiation, I think that's the main thing. That doesn't presuppose the outcome of the negotiation. As I've emphasized, it's a complex negotiation. There'll be zigs and zags, difficult aspects to it, but the prospect is there. We discussed it in more detail, and as I said a moment ago, we'll be following up both between officials, but also he and I in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Bon. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney.
Bonjour, madame.
Avec quoi
Good morning.
ressortez-vous concrètement de cette rencontre?
What have you come out of this meeting with in concrete terms? Well, we had a discussion about a number of different topics, geopolitical issues, and challenges that we are seeing to trade relations in Canada and the U.S. We had a concrete discussion, and we discussed perspectives when it comes to tariffs and the strategic objectives of Canada and of the United States. There are several issues on which we can move forward in our discussions. There is a plan, and as well there is the will between two countries to move forward with discussions. But there was no discussion on specific tariffs today. When Mr. Trump was asked about tariffs and if he intended to do anything about them or lift them today, he said no. So how do you interpret that? That was no surprise to me. Not at all. It's a very complex situation. There are a number of different tariffs, and there are links between U.S. initiatives, and the world is more dangerous and divided. There are links between our security and economic relationships. So there is no Canadian initiative that can change that situation. That's the reason why we need to have comprehensive discussions. So we should be expecting several months then before anything? Oh, we'll have to see. We'll see. We'll see how long it will take. It's not necessarily like that.
Joanna Smith from The Logic. At one point during the meeting in the Oval Office, the president, when talking about the tariffs and talking about a deal, also made very clear that when it comes to autos, his goal is to have car makers make them in the U.S. and for the tariffs to not make any economical sense to be made in Canada anymore. Do you anticipate lifting tariffs on autos at any point? And what did you tell him in the room about that topic?
Well, we had discussion about all the major issues in the room, so to speak, in the lunch afterwards, including autos, and specifically, without going into the full details, the strategic position of the North American auto industry, or more specifically, the Canadian-U.S. auto industry, versus foreign competition, including from Asia, and how that could be enhanced. I and the Canadian government, and I would say the Canadian auto industry, I would actually say the auto industry as a whole, is of the view that Canada, the Canadian auto workers, Canadian auto companies, Canadian parts companies, Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, all play an important role in enhancing the competitiveness of American auto companies. So we will continue to press that case and look for an arrangement that takes full advantage of it for the benefit of the United States, but of course, from our perspective, very much for the benefit of Canada.
And what did he ask you about China in your closed-door meetings, and what did you tell him?
That's why they're closed door. Well, yeah. We had a wide-ranging discussion.
Next question, prochaine question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Michel Sabat, la presse canadienne. Je vais essayer de faire
Good morning from La Presse Canadienne. I'd like to follow up on my colleague's question from earlier. Are you leaving here with anything tangible when it comes to trade and tariffs? As I said a few days ago, I wasn't expecting that we would be sending out white smoke from here. They are negotiations, as I mentioned, that are very complex and comprise a number of different aspects. But we did make progress. We had very comprehensive and tangible discussions. There will be meetings between ministers and senior staff, and then between myself and him. And we will meet in Alberta in mid-June. But we have made progress. But always, as with trade negotiations, any trade negotiations, there is a process. And the end is not necessarily progress that is apparent during the negotiations. That's just how negotiations are.
I mean, to summarize, look, in a negotiation, you don't get like little elements of it. You get an end to a negotiation. We're having a very complex negotiation about a wide range of issues. And it's, as I said before I came here, I wouldn't have expected white smoke coming out of this meeting. That was not my expectation, that because of the nature of the negotiation. So you don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress, because it's a global, that's why it's a global negotiation.
Talking about Alberta, what do you think about Danielle Smith's idea of encouraging a referendum on Alberta independence? And Canada is stronger when we work together as Canadians. I'm an Albertan. And I proudly believe in Canada. So that question can be asked, but for me the answer is clear.
Canada is stronger when we work together. As an Albertan, I firmly believe that. You can always ask a question, but I know what I would respond clearly.
Prochaine question. Next question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Olivier Ferrand-Boissé de TVA.
Good morning from TVA.
Monsieur Trump vous a convaincu qu'il voulait
Did Mr. Trump convince you that he really does want to renegotiate the free trade agreement? Because it didn't seem clear in the Oval Office. No, it is clear, yes.
C'est clair qu'il y aura,
it's clear that there will be. We started the renegotiation of our trade relationship. That includes NAFTA.
Vous aviez dit à plusieurs reprises que,
You've said several times that, in your opinion, Mr. Trump wanted to break us in order to own us. Is that still your reading of his intentions after your meeting?
Nous sommes forts.
I believe that we are strong, and Canada is becoming stronger every day, week after week, with the new government. So he will be disappointed with that idea.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. JP Tasker, CBC News. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, JP.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Do you feel better or worse about Canada-U.S. relations after meeting with the President today?
Look, it was a very constructive meeting. I feel better about the relations in the sense of, in many respects, one, the posture, if I can put it that way, or the positioning the President took towards us. Secondly, the breadth of discussion and how concrete the discussions were. These are the discussions you have when you're looking to find solutions, as opposed to laying down terms, if you will. So feel better about that. And I would add one other thing, which maybe isn't as obvious, so I should say it, which is that we also discussed a number of issues globally, geostrategically, if I can put it that way, where we have common interests, common concerns, and that, of course, is a sign of a broader and very healthy, or a healthy relationship. Look, we have, JP, we have a lot more work to do. I'm not trying to suggest at any respect that we can have one meeting and everything's changed. But now we are engaged and very fully engaged.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Ashley Burke, CBC News. What specifically did you say to President Trump about lifting tariffs on Canada? And based on your conversations, what do you think it would take to get those tariffs lifted, and how long could it take?
Well, I can't answer the second part of your question because we don't make that decision. But certainly press the case in a number of areas where we think the tariffs should be lifted. And specifically, I'll give an example with respect to the scourge of fentanyl and the considerable efforts that have been made at our border and behind the border in terms of raids as well. Huge investments in border personnel, in drone surveillance, Black Hawk surveillance, and then those are being reinforced, as you would have seen during the campaign, commitments to another 2,000, in effect, 1,000 border guards through CBSA, another 1,000 RCMP, further efforts there. And what we're seeing is huge results for this. Canada's contribution to this problem, cross-border problem, was always very small, but it's down by over 90% with the efforts. And it is an absolute focus of the government. So that is an example of where we would see the case being very strong for the tariffs to be removed. We've made that case. We'll see where that goes. In other areas, the tariffs are, in our view, not in the interests of American competitiveness and jobs. We have more work to do on making those cases on that. Thank you. Pardon? Sur le fentanyl.
In French,
Alors, nous avons fait beaucoup de progrès en ce qui concerne le fentanyl.
We made a lot of progress on fentanyl.
On a commencé.
There's been a drop.
Niveau très bas.
We started with a very low level compared to Mexico, less than 1%. But there was also a drop in the amount of fentanyl. It's nearly 0.1% now.
Des exemples. Alors, mais c'est pas par hasard.
But that's not just random. It's because we invested a lot in the security at our borders. And my government will reinvest even more, 20% more, for example, in border agents. The case for removing or getting rid of the tariffs related to fentanyl is very strong now.
For one last question and follow-up, dernière question de suivi.
Hi, Prime Minister. Stephanie Taylor with the National Post. I heard you say, there is a difference between the president's comments around Canada becoming a 51st state as a wish versus a reality. You told him that Canada was not for sale. But many Canadians are offended and deeply angered by the fact that he keeps repeating this comment. So have you asked the president to stop calling Canada the 51st state?
Yes. Today.
Okay, specifically, what did you ask him?
Exactly what you just said.
But what words did you use? How did you ask him?
Look, I gave you an answer. Do you have a follow-up?
En français. What was his answer?
Well, we'll look. I don't know. He's the president. He's his own person. I would go back to showing the difference between a wish and a reality. We're very clear. I've been very clear publicly, consistently. I've been very clear in private. It was clear again in the Oval Office. Would be clear throughout. The president. He understands that we're having a negotiation between sovereign nations and that we will only pursue and accept a deal that's in the best interests of Canada, not just in the short term, but in the medium and long term for Canada. J'ai dit, c'est pas utile de répéter cette idée.
There's no need to repeat that idea.
Mais
I
le
told him.
président, il va dire ce qu'il veut.
But the president is going to say whatever he wants.
Il y a une différence, une grande différence entre
But there's a big difference between reality and
This will
will,
be the
as you
last
know.
question. Sorry, just last question.
Okay.
Steph didn't take a follow-up. So last question, please. Thank you.
This is Bapal Manga from the Wall Street Journal. Given what's happened with the USMCA and the tariffs that Canada is facing, how do you trust that the U.S. right now is negotiating in good faith, and how do you trust any deal you sign with them?
We'll make that determination over the course of the negotiations. I mean, that's the bottom line on that. It's a process. You see, and I would emphasize the following, which is that we have been in the process, as most would know, of an election, and so this is the point at which a serious discussion begins. And so we had the president at his invitation. I'm here. He welcomed us. We had a very substantive, wide-ranging discussion with the president, but in the presence of the vice president, the secretary of commerce, the secretary of foreign affairs, and beyond, his chief of staff as well. Now I'm in trouble, Stephen Miller. I think that covers it. That covers it? I hope so. And we have some very specific things to follow up on and build out from that. And in any negotiation, then you make a determination based on that. It also, part of what you make a determination based on is, are the incentives aligned in the agreement that you get? And I think the lesson would be of this experience is to ensure that the incentives are aligned and durably so between the two countries, and that is a way that agreements are self-reinforcing. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, this was the next press conference. C'est ce qui met fin à notre conférence de presse. Merci.
All right, we've been listening to Prime Minister Mark Carney talk to reporters live from the Canadian Embassy after his high-stakes meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. We heard Mark Carney begin his remarks by saying that the two leaders met as two sovereign, independent nations, and that he tried to reiterate that they are stronger when they work together and can build stronger economies together. He said that their conversations were wide-ranging and constructive, and further conversations will be happening in the coming weeks. And, of course, they'll be meeting again at the G7 in Alberta later this summer. I want to bring back Vassy Kapelos to our conversation, who is also live at the Canadian Embassy, CTV's chief political correspondent. Vassy, the point that Carney did make is that he believes that this established a good basis today.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit down from where that press conference was happening, Scott, but I listened to every word, certainly hanging off those words to try and figure out the substance of what actually happened today, right? We spent a while talking in advance of this press conference about the change in tone, the respect shown by the president to the prime minister, in direct contrast, of course, to how he treated the previous prime minister of our country. But on the substance, like what actually changes today? And there were a number of questions on that front directed to the prime minister. What tangibly, for example, can you say occurred during this meeting, or do we take from it? It became pretty clear that there isn't anything very tangible at this juncture, which is also not a surprise. I think the federal government and the prime minister had pre-positioned that by saying last week in that press conference that there would be no white smoke, that essentially this is the start of a more formal engagement, if I read the comments right this afternoon from the prime minister, the start of a more formal engagement between the two countries that will essentially result in a negotiation. I don't know necessarily to what end. I'm not sure exactly what, for example, Canada's objective would be outside of the relationship that existed prior to all these tariffs, for example. But certainly it seems like there is some reason, as the prime minister described it, for some level of optimism about that progressing. And there's a couple of things I wanted to flag that he said. First of all, the posture or the position the president took toward us imbued on the prime minister, it seemed a sense that things could get a little bit more constructive moving forward, and that they discussed sort of like the breadth of the discussion, he said, how concrete those discussions were, indicated to him that the two parties, and in particular the United States in this case, were looking to find actual solutions versus just keep a problem going. So that, for me, was a clear takeaway. The other, though, occurred at the end of the press conference when the prime minister got pretty testy with, I believe it was Stephanie Taylor from the National Post, who asked, because of all this rhetoric around sovereignty, the threats that Donald Trump had made, the point that the prime minister made in the Oval Office about Canada not being for sale, did he ask the president to stop talking about that, and he said yes. He was asked for some detail about how he engaged the president on that, and he didn't want to provide it. He was also asked what the president's answer was, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, but that's for the president to answer for. But it appears, which will be interesting to see going forward, that the prime minister did ask the president to stop calling us the 51st state in so many words. So whether he does that or not, of course, is a different issue, but we'll be watching.
We'll have to wait and see if Donald Trump does continue his rhetoric of the 51st states. And Prime Minister Carney saying this is the point where the serious discussion begins. CTV's chief political correspondent Vash Capellos live from Washington, D.C., outside the Canadian Embassy. Vashi, thanks so much. And we will have a special edition of Power Play with Vash Capellos, and that is live from Washington.